Welcome again, everyone. And here are the latest updates and developments in the Russian invasion of Ukraine. U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland has added his voice to the invasion, promising Ukraine his help in prosecuting war crimes committed since the invasion began on February 24. In a press conference following his meeting with Ukraine's Prosecutor General, Irina Venediktova, near the Polish-Ukrainian border, he told reporters, "I'm here to express the unwavering support of the United States for the people of Ukraine in the midst of the unprovoked and unjust Russian invasion." Meanwhile, Turkish media is saying a military delegation will be traveling to Russia this week to discuss details of a possible sea corridor in the Black Sea for Ukrainian grain exports. A four-way meeting is planned between Turkey, Ukraine, Russia and the United Nations within 10 days. Finally, Ukraine says it has finally deployed advanced German artillery system and the latest delivery of the long-range precision weapons that it has been calling for. Ukraine's Defense Minister Oleksiy Reznikov wrote on social media, "Panzer Haubitz 2000 are finally part of 155mm howitzer arsenal of the Ukrainian artillery." A top ally of President Vladimir Putin has told Lithuania Moscow will respond to its ban on the transit of goods sanctioned by the EU to Russia's enclave of Kaliningrad in such a way that citizens of the Baltic state will feel the pain. With relations between Russia and the West at a half-century low over what Moscow calls its special military operation in Ukraine, Lithuania banned the transit of goods sanctioned by the European Union across its territory to and from the enclave, citing EU sanction rules. Nikolai Patrushev, a former KGB spy, who is now the Secretary of Russia's Security Council, said Lithuania's hostile actions show that Russia could not trust the West, which it said had broken written agreements over Kaliningrad. According to him, Russia will certainly respond to such hostile actions. He was quoted as saying on Russian media. Lithuania, a member of NATO and the European Union, says it was simply applying agreed EU sanctions on Russia, adding it was ironic to hear Moscow's complaints given its military operation in Ukraine. Now, for those living in Kaliningrad, sandwiched between the EU and NATO members, Poland and Lithuania are pretty fearful and filled with fear and regret over Lithuania's transit ban on Monday against goods coming from Russia. A number of them said construction works will stop. Development of roads, it's only going to get worse, many think. They also think that people will lose their jobs because there's still no other option, according to some of the residents. Many of them have been urged not to resort to panic buying. According to Representative of Kaliningrad region, the government's Dmitry Luskyov, two vessels already ferrying goods between Kaliningrad and St. Petersburg, and 7 more will be in service by the end of the year. Lithuanian authorities say a ban on the transit through their territory to the Russian enclave of Kaliningrad of goods that are subject to EU sanctions will take place from Saturday. It's already in effect. The ban on the news of the ban, beg your pardon, came on Friday through a video posted by the region's governor Anton Alikanov. EU sanctions list notably includes coal, metals, construction materials, and advanced technology. According to Alikanov, the ban will cover around 50% of items that Kaliningrad imports. Well, Kazakhstan's President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev says he thinks Russia's President Vladimir Putin has no plans to cut off gas supplies to Europe, adding that Mr. Putin was a staunch ally of Kazakhstan. He was making the comment at the Qatar Economic Forum in Doha. President Tokayev said there needs to be a more significant supply response from OPEC Plus oil-producing countries over the summer, and his country has capacity to quickly boost oil output to 100 tons per year. Kazakhstan is not a member of the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, but it does have observer status at the group and is a member of the broader OPEC Plus. Asked about his thoughts on the upcoming July visit by U.S. President Joe Biden to Saudi Arabia, President Tokayev said with a grin he wanted a friendly and predictable relationship with the United States. A comment met with laughter and applause from the audience. The British government says it's determined to impose further sanctions on Russia and will do so until Moscow fully withdraws from Ukraine. That's according to Foreign Minister Liz Truss. Truss said she would be traveling to Turkey tomorrow to discuss options to help get grain out of Odessa, saying there was only a matter of weeks to find a solution before a new harvest had to begin with storage already filled with grain from last year's harvest. Britain, the United States and the European Union have coordinated imposing massive sanctions on Moscow for what they call an invasion of Ukraine. Russian President Vladimir Putin has termed it a military operation.
More weapons. We are doing all we can to secure the export of that very important grain from Ukraine. And my honourable friend is right, we only have a number of weeks to be able to achieve that. We're backing the UN plan, but we're also doing what we can with our allies to provide safe passage, to make sure that Odessa is fully defended. And tomorrow I'll be travelling to Turkey to talk to them about how we can do more to get the grain out of Odessa. This is about freedom and democracy in Ukraine, and it's also about freedom and democracy in Europe and across the world. That's why we're determined to provide more weapons, impose more sanctions, and back Ukraine in pushing Russia out of their territory. And we will continue to impose sanctions. We will continue to stop importing goods from Russia until we see Russia fully withdraw from Ukraine.
Thank you,
Mr. Speaker.
Well, Big Macs and McFlurries may be off the menu at McDonald's successor restaurants in Russia, but the new firm has ambitious growth targets after it sold almost 120,000 burgers, a record on its opening day, according to its chief executive. McDonald's Corporation has fully exited Russia, selling all the restaurants it owned to a local licensee in May. Under the new name, Vkusno and Tochka, or Tasty and That's It, 50 restaurants in and around Moscow reopened on June 12th and 13th. Chief Executive Oleg Paryov is keen to add locations, but acknowledged the challenge of replacing some ingredients and suppliers, as well as dealing with other franchises still using McDonald's branding. The McDonald's exit saga shows both how difficult it is for Western consumer businesses that decided to leave over Moscow's actions in Ukraine to sever all ties to Russia, and for local operators to replace popular brands. Thousands of people who came to Vkusno and Tochka's flagship opening in Moscow's Pushkin Square were greeted with the new logo, a color scheme, and packaging shorn of all McDonald's branding, as the new company lost its rights to the U.S. group's trademark and intellectual property.
Несколько наших предприятий действительно поставили в этот день, в день открытия, исторический рекорд по дневному товарообороту. То есть дневной объем продаж по некоторым нашим предприятиям действительно поставил исторический рекорд. То есть такого дневного товарооборота мы не видели никогда за всю.
Well, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says Africa is a hostage in the war with Russia, which had contributed to rising food prices on the continent. African countries are acutely affected by the growing crisis, which has sent prices of grains, cooking oils, fuel and fertilizers soaring. In a speech to African Union leaders earlier this week, President Zelensky said the continent had been caught up in the situation not of its making. Moscow rejects accusations it deliberately is blocking grain exports from Ukraine and says global food and fuel price hikes are due to Western sanctions imposed on Russia over the February 24 invasion, which it calls a special military operation. Now, in early June, Senegal's President Macky Sall said Russia's President Vladimir Putin had told him he was ready to enable the export of Ukrainian grain to ease a global food crisis that was hitting Africa especially hard. We have the VOA's Anna Chernikova joining us now from Kyiv. Anna, great to see you as always. Thanks for joining us. And now all the buzz now is, of course, on Kaliningrad. And, you know, the Russians are, the Russian President Vladimir Putin threatening the country over its ban on EU imports. But in the eyes of Lithuania, I mean, it did nothing wrong. It simply had to side with the EU on this because it really isn't strong enough to stand on its own, is it?
Well, I think this is very, internal of the EU and Lithuania. So there are certain, rules, new rules in terms of sanctions that they have to follow. And I think this is a very internal question that should be, discussed and negotiated between probably the Russian authorities and Lithuanian authorities. And I think this is the best way, I guess, and this is how also here we see that it's, something that two countries should discuss and negotiate. And this is probably, well, of course, we don't know all the details and we don't know all the, additional questions that this might, bring up from both sides. But definitely this is something that these two countries should, discuss and come to a certain agreement between each other. But of course, it's a very difficult situation because, sanctions are ongoing, and unfortunately or fortunately, this is we don't. I mean, every side would have its own opinion on that, but. Probably, unfortunately for Kaliningrad, it's something that they're just in the middle, and this is definitely a difficulty that the government should just negotiate on.
Yeah, and we're seeing, Russia's backlash and all of these countries surrounding Ukraine, which are taking sides with Ukraine against Russia. And I'm just wondering, what the Ukrainian government thinks about this and what their response is, to Russia. All of these other countries seem to be putting their own relationships on the line, the relations with Russia, putting them on the line for Ukraine. Does the Ukrainian government appreciate that?
Well, Ukrainian government as well as Ukrainian society appreciate the help that European society and international society in general, all the international partners, have for Ukraine. But definitely for Ukraine, the relations and this, very internal questions between other countries, it's not probably something that Ukraine at least, publicly appreciate. So if we talk about officials and if we talk about, official position of the country, this is, this internal politics and political decisions that Ukraine probably, at least we don't have any, particular comments of, encouragements or appreciation. But of course, this is something that shows that sanctions are working and that sanctions is not just, just words. It's basically rules that the country is following. And of course, it's really, it's really great to see that sanctions are working, because this is exactly the reason why these sanctions were introduced, because Russia started the war in Europe, and Ukraine for the moment is protecting the whole Europe and the whole, free world, so-called. And I mean, of course, it's, I think that this is important, and for Ukraine, it's great to see that sanctions are working. But in particular, this particular situation, we don't really have, so far at least, certain, official announcements. Maybe it's coming later, but for the moment, this is how it is here in Ukraine.
Yeah, and people will be looking out for President Zelensky's response. He's the one who's called out even some world leaders, Germany, for instance, asking them to do more. President Macron, he criticized his relations with the Russian president as well. But this is also the first time we've heard the Ukrainian president talk about Africa, describing the continent as a hostage in the war with Russia. Many African countries do have enjoy cordial relations with Russia. Does the Ukrainian president expect that African leaders will begin to rethink their relations with Russia because they want to sympathize with Ukraine?
I think that's this is quite a global question, because globally a lot of countries probably will have to rethink, because unfortunately, because of this war that Russia started in Ukraine, a lot of countries around the world are suffering. So basically, we can see that the whole world is suffering from some more, some less, some countries more, some countries less, but in general, everyone, because a lot of food production is coming from Ukraine, especially if we talk about African continent and African countries. And of course, everything should be probably rethink, and at least, it's a new step, definitely, for many countries, for different countries and for different governments. It's, of course, it's very difficult, geopolitical question and, political relations, but every country should look at it, with a long-term perspective. And of course, in long-term perspective, Russia is not doing, a favor for a lot of countries and a lot of regions. So, probably, yes, probably this is not only about, African countries, but just in general, as we also can see that, for example, EU countries, they are rethinking their relationship with Russia in terms of oil and gas. And probably this is something that other countries that depend that depend on food production that comes from Ukraine, and that depend, in general, on the food market that comes from Ukraine, should definitely also, probably rethink. But again, we'll see. And again, it's not some, official announcements or official comments on that yet in particular. So I can just, analyze it as, as a general picture.
Anna, thanks again for joining us.
Thank you.